The ice cracked just before she saw him. Evelyn had been cutting across the frozen river on her way back from the ridge, a burlap sack of herbs slung over one shoulder, when the sharp report echoed through the still air. At first, she thought it was the trees shifting under the cold. But then she heard it again. A hollow thud, followed by a sound too soft to ignore. A moan, desperate and muffled, as if coming from beneath her feet. She dropped the sack, heart pounding, and dropped to her knees on the frost-slick surface. The moan came again. She crawled forward, palms stinging from the cold, and saw it. A hand, darkened with bruises, pressed weakly against the underside of the ice. Panic surged through her. Someone was alive under there. She grabbed the hunting knife from her boot and began hacking at the ice with everything she had. Her hands went numb. Her sleeves soaked through. Her breath came out in wild clouds. After what felt like hours, the hole gave way with a splash, and she reached in, ignoring the burning cold, locking her hands around his arms and dragging him free. He was heavy, nearly lifeless, his chest barely rising. She rolled him over and saw his face. Sharp features, braided black hair, a ceremonial necklace still clutched in his fist. A Shoshone warrior. One who shouldn't be this far east. One who shouldn't be alive. She dragged him to the riverbank, wrapped him in her shawl, and pressed her ear to his chest. A heartbeat, faint, slow, but there. Evelyn lived alone, miles from town, the kind of woman people called strange because she knew plants better than people. But she didn't hesitate. She lashed together a sled from fallen branches, loaded his unconscious body, and hauled him home through the snow with lungs burning and feet blistering. She didn't stop until she reached her cabin. Didn't sleep until the fire was roaring and he was wrapped in every blanket she owned. That night, she sat beside him, watching the flames cast shadows across his still face. She didn't know who he was, or how he'd ended up under the ice. But something about him felt ancient, like he belonged to a world older than hers. And as the storm rolled in outside, she whispered to the warrior he couldn't yet hear, "If you're meant to live, you'd better fight for it." She didn't know then. He already had. Because 5 days before, in a dream soaked with blood and stars, he'd seen her face. He woke on the 5th day, not to the warmth of fire or the weight of wool, but to a memory so sharp it dragged him out of the void, gasping. In his mind, the river still roared, his limbs still frozen. But beneath that terror was something else. Her face. Not as he saw it now, hovering pale and startled above him, but as it had appeared before the ice claimed him, in a vision. A woman kneeling in firelight, a whisper on the wind, a name he couldn't speak. His eyes blinked open and the cabin ceiling loomed above him. He flinched at the sudden shift, his breath hitching. The ache in his chest was thick and dull, but bearable. Then she leaned into his vision. Brown hair, freckled skin, tired eyes full of both worry and defiance. She didn't recoil when he stirred. "Easy," she murmured, her voice low and careful. "You're safe. I pulled you from the river." He stared at her, confusion flickering across his face, but didn't speak. She pressed a warm mug to his lips. "Drink. Just broth." He obeyed, weakly, each swallow bringing a tremor to his hands. He didn't know this woman, but he knew her, not from any trail or tribe, from somewhere deeper, a knowing that hummed beneath his ribs. "Your name?" she asked gently. "Towa," he rasped, his voice like gravel. She nodded, as if she'd expected it. "Evelyn." They didn't speak more that day. He drifted in and out of sleep, fevered, half lost in memory and vision. Each time he woke, Evelyn was there, cooling his forehead with wet cloth, changing his wrappings, whispering herbs into the stew. Towa watched her when he could. The way she moved. The way she didn't flinch from his scars or from the ceremonial beads that marked his status among the Shoshone. Most settlers looked at him with fear or curiosity. She looked at him like she already knew what the world had tried to do to him. That night, as he lay watching the fire crackle low, he finally spoke again. "Why?" She looked over from her chair. "Why what? Why save me?" Her reply was simple. "Because I heard you." He blinked. "Under the ice?" "No," she said. "Before that. In my dreams." She paused. "Your voice called for me." His heart slowed. His fingers twitched beneath the blanket. And for the first time since he was a child, Towa felt fear, not of death or strangers, but of something far more dangerous. Fate. Because in his dreams, too, he had called for her. By the 7th day, Towa could sit up on his own, though every movement pulled against bruised ribs and aching limbs. Evelyn didn't hover. She let him move at his own pace, watching quietly from the stove where she crushed wild garlic with the flat of her knife. Her cabin was modest but warm, walls lined with herbs, a worn table by the window, pelts layered thick beneath his bedding. It smelled of pine and smoke and something softer, like rosemary and dried apples. He had been in many places, but nothing had ever felt quite like this, both untouched and lived in, as if time itself had paused here to breathe. "You fought the river," she said that morning, handing him a steaming bowl. "You should be dead." He accepted it with a quiet nod, spooning slowly, his fingers still stiff. "I've died before," he said, more to the bowl than to her. "Once in war, once in snow. This time something pulled me back." Evelyn tilted her head. "What was it?" His eyes lifted to meet hers. "A face." Her hand stilled on the cutting board. "What did she look like?" "Tired," he said softly, "and angry at the world, but not broken." Evelyn didn't answer. She only returned to slicing, though her grip on the knife tightened slightly. Later that day, while he slept, she sat beside the hearth and traced the scars on his chest with her eyes. Old wounds, healed poorly, a map of survival across skin too young to carry that much pain. She didn't ask how he got them. She didn't need to. Her own scars were buried deeper. Memories of a husband who drank too much, a miscarriage that had taken her child in the middle of a winter storm, and a town that never truly forgave her for surviving either. Towa watched her through half-lidded eyes as she moved about the cabin. She spoke with her hands, listened with her silences. She never asked where he'd come from, or who he'd killed, or why a Shoshone warrior had been under that river. And he didn't ask why she lived alone, why her eyes sometimes stared too long at the fire, or why she whispered names in her sleep. They were both hiding, in their own ways. Not from the world, but from what it had taken. And in that silence, something bloomed. Not trust, not yet, but understanding. The kind that didn't need words. That night, as wind rattled the windows and frost painted the glass, they sat across from each other with the fire between them, and said nothing. But for the first time, it didn't feel empty. The snow deepened that week, blanketing the forest in silence, so thick it swallowed sound. Towa regained his strength slowly, limping with a carved walking stick Evelyn had shaped for him from a branch outside her door. She didn't offer him pity, only space. He spent his days by the shed splitting wood, one-handed at first, then with full force by the third morning. Evelyn pretended not to watch, but she always made sure the water barrel near him was thawed, and a bowl of stew waited before the sun dipped below the trees. They spoke little, but what they said mattered. Towa told her he had been hunting when the ice cracked. A sacred trail, one he shouldn't have walked alone. "A vision led me," he said. "I followed it too far." "What did you see?" she asked. He paused. "A woman kneeling beside fire, and a crow circling above her head. When I saw you, it was the same fire." She said nothing, but her breath caught. Evelyn had seen the crow, too, days before she found him. It had followed her from the ridge to the river, cawing once before vanishing into the sky. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't had anyone to tell. Until now. That evening, Towa reached for his medicine pouch and drew out a small object wrapped in hide. Inside was a token carved from bone, a warrior falling through wind, arms outstretched. "This was made by my grandmother," he said. "It's called Wiopeata Oihaka, the one who falls westward. It's given to those who survive what should have ended them." He placed it in her hands. "It's yours now." Evelyn blinked. "I didn't fall." "You did," he said gently, "but you got up before anyone saw." Her throat tightened. She hadn't cried in years. Not since the baby. Not since the townspeople told her a woman like her must have done something to deserve so much loss. "You don't know what I've done," she whispered. Towa leaned closer, his voice calm. "It doesn't matter. Only what you did after." She stared at the token in her palm. Simple, rough, warm from his skin. It felt heavier than it looked, as if it carried something more than bone. That night, she placed it beside her bed, beside the locket she hadn't touched in 5 winters. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn dreamed without waking in fear. She dreamed of a river that did not freeze, a warrior who did not die, and hands reaching for each other, not out of desperation, but choice. The snow hadn't yet melted when the riders came. Evelyn saw them first from the ridge, just 3 shapes against the horizon, dark against the white, moving slow, steady, too clean for trappers, too deliberate for merchants. She squinted through the bare branches, heart quickening. She knew the posture of men looking for something, or someone. She hurried back to the cabin, the wind biting at her face, and found Towa sharpening a blade by the fire. His eyes flicked up the moment she stepped in. "Riders," she said. "South Trail, 3 of them." He stood instantly, all calm, gone. "Describe them." "Tall, one had a fur collar. The others just watching. Too still." Towa's jaw clenched. He didn't curse, but his silence said enough. "You know them?" she asked. "I know their kind," he said. "One's a scout from Fort Bragg. I saw him once when my brother was taken." Evelyn's stomach turned. "What do they want?" Towa didn't answer right away. He began wrapping his belongings, the carved token, a bone whistle, the pouch of dried herbs Evelyn had helped him fill. "They want me, or what I know." She stepped between him and the door. "You're not leaving." "I'm not hiding behind your walls." "Then don't hide. Stand beside me." Towa stopped, his breath misting in the cold air. "They don't take kindly to women who shelter my kind." "I didn't ask for kindness," she said. "I asked if you're done running." He looked at her like she was something new, something impossible. And slowly he nodded. Together they moved. She doused the lanterns. He dug a shallow trench near the cabin, hiding his bow beneath a snow-covered tarp. Evelyn had never fought a man in her life, but that night, she ground ash bark into powder and packed it into satchels, just as her mother once had during a fever season. Smoke bombs, if thrown into fire, a last defense. As dusk settled, the riders came close enough to smell the pine smoke from her chimney. One dismounted, adjusting his gloves, and approached the door. Evelyn stood behind it, knife in hand, heart hammering like war drums. Towa waited by the back wall, crouched low, breath slow, blade in hand. A knock, then silence. "Ma'am," a voice called. "We're just looking for someone. Injured, Shoshone, maybe dangerous. Evelyn opened the door slowly, her eyes cold. No one dangerous here, she said. Just me. And in the trees behind them, the wind carried a low sound, almost like a growl, almost like warning. The man on the porch didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted when Evelyn stepped out. She wore no coat despite the bitter cold, only a shawl wrapped tight, and a look that dared him to press further. Behind her, the fire crackled faintly, the door left half open like a challenge. Mind if we look around? The man asked, voice calm but flat. Got word someone crawled out of the river nearby. We're tracking a man escaped from custody. You think he came here? Evelyn asked. Alone? Barely breathing. He smiled without warmth. He's resourceful, dangerous. We just want to be sure everyone's safe. She tilted her head. Everyone's been safe until men like you started sniffing around. The man stepped forward, but her hand dropped to her side, resting just beside a small pouch tucked under her belt. This is private land, she said. A day's ride from town. I've buried better men for less. The man paused. You threatening me, miss? No, she said softly. I'm warning you. From the shadows, Towa watched through the side window, muscles coiled. He didn't want to kill again, but he would. The other two riders flanked the cabin slowly, boots crunching on snow. One reached for the shed door. Evelyn moved fast, tossed the ash pouch into the hearth, and slammed the door shut. The fire roared. In seconds, smoke billowed thick through the cracks. The porchman swore and stumbled back. The others choked as the smoke bombs ignited, filling the air with a stinging, blinding gray cloud. That's when Towa moved. Silent as wind, he slipped behind the nearest rider and pressed the blade to his throat. Quiet, he hissed. The man dropped his rifle. Inside the house, Evelyn held the porchman at gunpoint now. Her late husband's rifle finally pulled from above the mantel. You'll tell Fort Bragg you found nothing, she said. Or next time I'll aim first. The man wiped soot from his face, coughing. You hiding a fugitive? No, she said. I'm protecting someone the ice gave back. You think the land wants him gone, you'd better ask the river why it let him go. Towa tied the second man's hands behind his back and kicked the third's rifle out of reach. No blood was shed, only smoke, ash, and humiliation. When they rode off, eyes watering, coughing and swearing, Evelyn collapsed onto the porch steps, heart still hammering. Towa sat beside her, quiet. You could have run, she whispered. So could you, he replied. And for the first time, they both smiled. Tired, broken, alive. That night, after the riders were gone and the smoke had cleared, Evelyn didn't light the lanterns. She and Towa sat by the hearth, wrapped in silence deeper than any they'd shared before. The air still carried the scent of ash, bitter and sacred. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea, but she didn't try to hide it. Towa noticed, of course. He noticed everything, but he didn't speak of it. Instead, he reached across the table and set something beside her cup. The carved token. The one of the warrior falling westward. It belongs by your fire now, he said. Evelyn stared at it, her throat tight. I almost let them in. But you didn't. I almost failed. But you didn't. She looked up. Why does that feel like the first battle I've ever won? Towa's voice was steady. Because it's the first one you chose. She wrapped her fingers around the token. It felt warmer now, like it remembered her touch. Her hands, once used only for healing, had protected someone, had threatened men, had built a shield out of silence and smoke. She didn't feel proud exactly. She felt reclaimed. There's something I never told you, she said, eyes still on the fire. Years ago, when I lost the baby, I stopped dreaming. I used to have vivid ones. Colors, voices. But after that winter, nothing. Like the world went dark in my sleep. Towa nodded, waiting. Then the night before I found you, I dreamed again. Of the river. Of your hand under the ice. He didn't look surprised. I had the same vision 5 nights before I crossed the river. Your face, your shawl, even the crack in the ice. Then why did you still go? She asked. Because visions are not warnings, he said. They're invitations. I had to accept. Evelyn let the words settle between them. Her grief had been a fog for so long, a wound that didn't bleed but never healed. But here, in the wake of danger, with firelight flickering against his face, she felt the fog lifting, not all at once, but enough to breathe. What happens now? She asked. Towa leaned back, gaze steady. Now we build something the snow can't bury. And when he reached across the table this time, it wasn't for a token. It was for her hand. She let him take it, not as a lifeline, not as a rescue, but as something stronger, a beginning. And as they sat there, 2 souls pulled together by visions and ice and fire, Evelyn knew the truth. The dreams were not done with them. Because some stories are chosen, and some, like theirs, are remembered by the fire. The thaw came slowly, with the sun lingering longer each day and the snow pulling back like a tide that knew its time had passed. Evelyn began planting again. Wild onions near the shed, sage near the porch steps, and a row of small green shoots beside the firewood pile. She moved differently now, less like a woman waiting out the world, and more like someone shaping it. Towa carved daily, fingers bringing shape to wood, as if revealing something that had always been there. He rarely spoke while he worked, but Evelyn didn't need words to understand. She'd grown fluent in his silences. One evening, as twilight painted the trees in lavender and gold, Towa handed her a small object wrapped in deerskin. "Open it," he said simply. Inside was a wooden pendant, shaped like a flame curling around a mountain. At its base, a single feather was etched with care. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "What does it mean?" "I named it for you," he replied. "In my language." "What name?" "Tanepoa," he said. "It means, she who endures the cold and still blooms." Evelyn looked down, heart thudding, unable to speak for a long moment. "You gave me a name?" "No," he said softly. "I saw what was already there and gave it shape." She blinked back, the sting in her eyes. No one had ever named her anything but widow, or crazy healer, or the woman who lost her child. This was different. This was not a label. It was a recognition. "I've never belonged to anything," she said, her voice cracking. "Not to this land, not to the people, not even to myself." Towa reached out and tied the pendant around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. "Now you belong to the wind, to the fire, to the stories." "What stories?" she asked. He looked towards the hills. "The ones the children will whisper when they pass this place, about the woman who pulled a warrior from the ice and who refused to freeze again." That night, Evelyn wore the pendant to sleep, and in her dreams she walked through snow barefoot, untouched by the cold, her hair braided with feathers, her hands glowing like embers. The crow circled above her once more, but this time it did not call out. It simply followed, watching, witnessing, and when she turned around, she wasn't alone. Towa was there, walking beside her, not behind, not ahead. As equals, as something wordless but eternal. And when she woke, his hand was in hers, as if the dream had simply continued. They heard the horse long before they saw it. One set of hooves, slow and deliberate, crunching over thawing gravel where snow had only recently surrendered. Evelyn was trimming sage by the porch, while Towa cleaned his arrows, when their eyes met in perfect silence. Neither needed to speak. The man who dismounted was older than Towa remembered, but no less dangerous. Broad shoulders, a rifle slung low, and the same scar that split his chin in two. His name was Brant Kessler, a bounty hunter known across the Northern Territories for bringing back what others had given up on. Dead or alive, he didn't care, and Towa had once escaped him. "You've led me a long way," Brant said, tipping his hat to Evelyn, though his eyes never left Towa. "Didn't expect to find you playing house with a settler." Towa stood from the step, his face calm but his stance ready. "I'm not the man you chased." "No," Brant said. "That man was half frozen and bleeding out. You look warm now, federal, dangerous again." "Then ride on." Brant chuckled, stepping closer. "You took something from Fort Bragg. They want it back." "I took nothing but my life," Towa said. "And you think that's free?" Evelyn stepped down from the porch, holding nothing but the same stare she'd given those soldiers weeks ago. "This land doesn't belong to the fort, and neither does he." Brant raised an eyebrow. "You aiming to stop me, ma'am?" "No," she said. "He will." The moment Brant's hand twitched toward his belt, Towa moved. Not with rage, not with chaos, just speed and precision born of need. The blade in his hand flashed once. Brant staggered, rifle dropping. He clutched his arm, blood seeping through his coat. "You'll regret this," Brant hissed. "No," Evelyn said. "We already regretted too many things before today." Towa didn't kill him. He didn't need to. He took Brant's satchel, emptied his bullets into the earth, and tied his hands with leather from the shed. They left him near the road with a canteen and enough jerky to survive. Let the land judge him. Let the fort wonder why their hunter came back broken. That night, Towa sat on the porch, sharpening the same blade. Evelyn brought him tea and leaned against his shoulder. "You didn't kill him," she said. "Because he's not part of the story I want to leave behind," Towa replied. She smiled. "Then let's write a new one they won't forget." The moon rose over the ridge, and they stayed like that, two shadows no longer hiding. Years later, travelers would still speak of the cabin with the sage garden, nestled between the river and the ridge, where winter once nearly claimed a life, and instead gave it back. Children whispered about the woman who had pulled a warrior from beneath the ice, and how the man never left her side again. Some claimed he was a ghost, reborn from snow and storm. Others said she was a witch, but not with curses, only with firelight and silence that made men confess things they couldn't explain. But those who truly knew this. They had simply survived more than most. Evelyn lived out her days without returning to town, and yet her name passed from mouth to mouth like a secret prayer. Not the widow anymore, not the healer, but Tanipoa, the one who bloomed after the cold. Towa built trails through the forest no map ever marked. He carved tokens for children who visited and told stories in the Shoshone tongue to those who stayed long enough to listen. He never raised his voice, but his presence made even wolves keep their distance. One spring, a traveling hunter stumbled into their clearing and asked if the stories were true. About the river, about the vision, about the man who had seen his rescuer's face before meeting her. Evelyn only smiled and poured him tea. "Some stories don't need to be explained," she said. "Only lived." Before the hunter left, Towa pressed a carved feather into his hand. "Take it back to the place where you lost something," he said. "It might return in a different form." The hunter never forgot them. None who met them ever did. When Evelyn passed, her grave was placed at the edge of the river, the same river that had once tried to take him, the same river that gave them a future. Towa planted sage at the foot of her resting place and returned every morning to sit in silence. He didn't speak to her ghost. He didn't have to. They had said all that needed to be said when they were both still breathing. Years later, when he too joined the earth, travelers found the two graves side by side, untouched by time. And near them stood a stone, carved in two tongues, one in English, one in Shoshone. It read, "The river took him." She pulled him back. Together they became the story that stayed. And in the breeze that passed between the trees, it was said you could hear her voice, and his, like wind on ice, like fire on snow, never ending.